Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Victory Outdoors, the podcast. Today I'm joined by basically field producer Jake Reed. Jake, man, how you been?
Not bad at all. I've been doing a lot of shooting, doing a lot of kind of twisting my setup a little bit, and spending way too much money on archery. That's all I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this time of the year, man. It's kind of busting out all the new toys and seeing what's. I mean, everybody's getting ready for turkey season, but you know those hardcore archery guys like you guys are kind of getting ready for indoors, kind of starting to wind down, and you guys are getting ready to start some of the outdoor. I know back when I used to shoot a lot, late March, early April is when they always had the chili, invitationals or whatever they call them. Like you always like you'd show up to a club shoot and they'd have a free bowl of chili that you got with every entry fee or something along those lines. So getting to be that time of the year.
Yeah, they have one of those right next to my house. Actually, it's the Warren County Isaac Walton League. They have a chili shoot coming up in April, and I remember shooting it. It was the prettiest shoot I've ever been to by far. I was shooting through like holes in the timber of just snow cover, and it was simply amazing, really.
Yeah, and for you folks that are from the South, we still have snow in April in Iowa. It's a pretty common event. Unfortunately, I wish we didn't have snow right now, man. I mean, we were just talking kind of before we got started here about shed hunting and trying to get out. And man, today it is like 10 degrees with a wind chill of like negative, like puts it down to like a -8. Just not. I mean, it's late. It's basically, I guess I'd call it mid to late April, or excuse me, mid to late March. I mean, it's prime time to be out finding antlers. Most of the bucks have dropped. I've seen a few still carrying, but for the most part, you should be able to find some antlers, and it's just still fun to be out in this cold of weather.
This whole time of year it's super weird because it goes from snow covered to muddy.
Yeah.
And then which one's really worse? I mean, obviously you can find sheds easier in the mud than you can in the snow, but trudging around in it, especially for guys like me, where I'm simply either they don't shed where I can hunt or where I can walk, or I just don't see them. Like my eyesight's bad, I know that, but it can't be that bad. I can't walk over 20 sheds a year. Like, okay, 2, 3 I get, but 20, But luckily, some other guys on the team are really good about it, and I get to
Yeah.
at least hold some bone this time of year.
Yeah, I don't think you probably give yourself enough credit. Like you're better than I am. I think most everybody on the team is probably better at shed hunting than I am. That includes like Carrie and Natalie. They seem to do better at it than I do. I mean, even Carrie and I went out, took the two younger kids with us a couple weeks back, and I mean, we were just going through the first gate, and there's a food plot right there that Carrie killed a nice doe out of late season, and about 10 yards from where that doe dropped, there was a big, nice, not a monster, but probably like a 30-inch side or 40-inch side 8-pointer sitting there, and it was like nice antler, nothing too crazy. And she's like, hey, go have B pick that one up. And I'm like, what? And I look over and there's an antler there, and she's just like, no big deal. Like, oh, there it is. There's an antler. I'm like, that's a pretty good antler. But yeah, I mean, it's not my forte. Dennis, man, he's really good at it. Drexel, they get out. Garrett, I know Talon gets out there in Kansas. He was doing a little shed hunting. And Zach, he doesn't do a ton of shed hunting, but you know what Zach is really good at finding? Morel mushrooms. That dude, and he's one of those guys. He's one of those mushroom freaks. Like he likes to get out and do it. Like as soon as he knows those mushrooms are popping, man, he's out there searching for them, and he knows all the spots and all that stuff. He'll come back with a whole grocery sack full of them. It's like, again, not something I'm good at. Like I can kill deer, I can kill turkeys. I am not I don't know if it's an eyesight thing or what, but when it comes to looking for sheds, when it comes to looking for all that kind of stuff, it is not my forte. I wish I was better at it. I have, I love shed hunting. It's fun. I love fighting the sheds. It's just you put on so many miles and for, maybe one or two, and it's like, like I'm not out there like Dennis walks, like he'll do 12 miles in a day or something like that, which is not, I'll do 12 miles. That's not that big a deal. But it seems like I do 12 miles and I found a shed, and he does 12 miles and comes away with like 6 or 8. So, but yeah, so man, yeah, the 3D archery. So what were you shooting today? I know you had a shoot this morning. What'd you end up? What kind of shoot was that?
Yeah, me and a buddy that I actually kind of met through shooting. His name's Wolfgang. We shot a 2-man best shot indoor shoot, 50-yard max, known yardage. Kind of not my forte, but I'm kind of an unknown yardage, 40-yard max kind of guy. Bow hunter class basically. That's kind of where I've thrived. With the as mentioned, crappy eyesight and all that stuff. You get out there and there's so many things that can go wrong. Past 40 yards. And I'm not a perfect shot by any means, but I just bought a new sight actually last night, and I ran up to the archery shop and I threw sight tape on it and everything else, and it's my first time ever shooting a lens, and it was a totally different experience. Something that I definitely think I'm going to have to get used to, but once I do, I think that these guys that have just been beating me and got really used to it probably better watch out because I'm coming for the money.
Nice. Yeah. I've never shot a lens either. I know Dennis messed around with one. He had one year where he had a torn retina, and he had like an eye problem, and he was having trouble seeing the pins. Everything was blurry, and so he put a lens on there, and it helped clear it up for him a lot. And when I mean that, I'm talking about a lens inside the peep, type of lens.
Yeah, like a clarifier or a verifier.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I don't know all the technical stuff about that part of it because I've never used one, but it helped him. And then he got rid of it once his eye kind of healed. Once he was healed up and he was able to get rid of it, he got rid of it. But, those are, a lot of times people are like, if you, wear glasses or you have poor eyesight and that kind of stuff, it's a different deal. Especially if you're like a bifocal type person, like where you need reading glasses and you need the far, assistance and that kind of stuff. Like a lot of times, just simply wearing contacts, like that's not going to do it when it comes to archery. When you're talking about those two different planes and you're trying to look through a peep sight and line up the peep sight with the pin and then try to see the target beyond the pin and all that kind of stuff and trying to keep all that kind of in perspective. There's a lot going on there that I don't probably understand like you do, where I don't have glasses but my wife does. Like she's got contacts and it's a lot different. Like she really doesn't want to shoot with glasses on. She wants to have the contacts in when she especially when she's bow hunting. She doesn't want to wear glasses. Sometimes when we'll shoot like just practice and stuff like that, she'll just use her glasses, but And I'm just kind of thinking like my routine and where my string hits and where my peep hits and how everything lines up. It's like I can't imagine having glasses on my face because I've had sunglasses on my face before. And you go to shoot and you're like, oh, got to get these sunglasses off and got to take them, get them because I don't like it. It hits, where that string comes in, it hits my nose and everything comes across my face. It like. Just I don't like having the glasses there. I can't see through the glasses. The frames get in the way of the peep and all that kind of stuff. And it's just for whatever reason, like that's something that I just think about the people who do wear glasses and contacts about what kind of a struggle that ends up being. And then, when you start talking about being a competitive archer, and you guys will have to forgive Jake. He sometimes doesn't probably give himself as much credit as he does. He claims to be a bow hunter class type guy and that kind of thing, but he also has won the Iowa Games gold medal. I know he doesn't like to brag about it and that kind of stuff. He doesn't like to tell people about it, but I will. I mean, it was one of the coolest things. Like and to some degree, I was sitting there going, man, I'm kind of a little jealous, man. That's sweet. Like, I totally want one of those. Like, and it's always been something that I thought, man, I should go shoot the Iowa Games. That'd be fun, and I would never dream though. I mean, I've won maybe a handful of 3D archery tournaments, and it was just because I happened to be the best guy that showed up that day, and like guaranteed, like some of the top shooters around and that kind of stuff, whether it was when I was up in Northeast Iowa, I can't hold a candle to some of them dudes. And I really do. I would put myself in that bow hunter class. Like, I mean, you and I have shot together before and that kind of stuff. And it's like, even when I was really competitive, really into it and that kind of stuff, even then it was like, I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it for practice. I'm doing it to be a better hunter. And it's almost like when I got into turkey calling, the same thing. Like, I did it to make me a better hunter. I love competition. Like, I mean, and with 3D archery for me, while I do have some guys that I like shooting with, that there is like a friendly competition between us when we shoot and that kind of thing, and that's fun. It's like golf to me. 3D archery is that trying to, better yourself. Like, can I beat myself? Like, can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I end up with that better score, that personal better score? So like in golf, you're trying to get that low score and like, I mean, my personal best is a 38 or something like that. I don't know. And then in archery, you're looking at, okay, can you shoot an entire round without, a 5? I mean, when I first started, the buddies I was shooting with was like, yeah, just try not to miss one, try not to have a 0 on a target. And it's like, can't even remember the last time I missed a target. Actually, I can, because it was in Nebraska this year, like very first target, like shot.
I watched people that have shot in the Olympics miss targets. I mean, it happens to everyone.
Yeah. In this case, that Nebraska shoot that you and I shot at earlier this year, the targets were indoor. They were so tight together that they intentionally put these really tight windows to make it hard. And they had this doe target right in front of the vitals of this. I think it was a buck or something, or maybe it was an elk or something we were shooting at. It was like the very first target. And my first arrow was great, and I think it was my second arrow, like, hit the one right in the face. Like, I was like, I'm pretty sure I saw that deer target move. Either it's a great shot or I shot that deer in the face. So I got a 0. That was like my first 0 I probably had in like 10 years. But got a 0 on that arrow. But generally, like, I can remember legitimately, like, starting out there, like, I didn't want to miss. Then I was like, I didn't want to end up with a 5. And then I got to, what's the least number of 8s I can get, and have all 10s. And so most of the places I shot up in Northeast Iowa, they didn't score the 12. The 12 ring was a 10, but it was a 10X. And so you put the X down, you circled it because it was a tiebreaker. So
Okay.
if you were going to be in the money, and you're going to be up there, then you wanted to keep track of those because it would be a tiebreaker type situation. But realistically, like, I mean, that's how I've always viewed it. So like, I'm in that kind of category with how many 8s am I going to have in a round of 40 targets, right? And can I keep that number below whatever? And that's, my measurement tool for me, and if I have a 5, like, I'm going to be disappointed, but, with as little as I've shot in the last couple of years with the little kids and stuff, I might shoot 1 or 2 3D archery tournaments a year now.
Part of that shooting the 5 though is how do you battle back, and how much pressure do you put on yourself, and honestly how you overcome adversity. And it's just kind of like in any sport, whether it be any individual sport, wrestling, pool, golf, stuff like that. it's all about what you can do. So if you make a bad shot, do you let it get in your head and now the next 3 or 4 or 5 or your entire day is ruined? Or do you be like, well, I can shoot that 5, and if I shoot 3 12s, then it goes, I'm basically back even. You're actually one up, but you're back even, and just make up for it. Honestly, I've shot some of my best scores outside after shooting a 5. I'll shoot like a 5 on like the 4th target. I'll be so mad at myself that I'm like, all right, for the rest of the shoot, I'm going to prove to myself how well I can shoot. And
Yeah.
I love that about archery.
And that's just that internal mental battle, and that transitions so well over to hunting, because you can, have a couple of hunts that don't go your way, whether they're misses or whether they're just, out of your control. Like, as bow hunters, we sometimes tend to get down on ourselves when the deer walks the opposite way. And it's like, there's nothing you can do about that. Like, you couldn't have changed anything about that hunt as the hunter. The deer just simply didn't come by you within range. And people have a tendency to sometimes get really hard, down on themselves, or just get burned out, like they're on their like 5th sit in a row, and it's gonna happen, and something happens and the deer goes a different direction, or you miss, or something crazy, which we've all been there before as bow hunters. I mean, anybody who says they haven't just started bow hunting, like, if you haven't missed a deer, then you haven't been deer hunting that long. Now, we all like to make good, ethical, clean shots and that kind of stuff, but it's inevitable. Something will happen, and whether it's hopefully it's a clean miss, and that kind of stuff. I mean, but there are times where it just happens, and being able to mentally recover from that and rebound, and do it in a quick manner like that, I mean, when you're in the moment, 4th target, you shoot a 5 and you're upset with yourself. And then it's like, don't let that ruin the next 5 targets, because you can easily go the next 5 targets, 8, 8, 8, 5, 8. And all of a sudden it's like, now you really are out of it. It's like, you completely, hosed yourself there. Like, it's like, if you let that affect you in a bad way, it can go the opposite way too. And I learned that early from a buddy of mine, that I shot with up in Northeast Iowa. And he was one of those guys, a scratch shooter, shot the worlds and all that kind of stuff. He was one of the top dogs, and I met him at a money shoot. And it was back when I was shooting like every weekend. And I was hardcore, into it. And I was not of his caliber at all. But I got paired with him for a money shoot, and you had to keep your score and your competitor's score. And then you basically you handed your scorecards to him, and he handed me his scorecards for each of us, and then we added up each other's sport, and then they needed to match, right? So it was a way to keep people honest, because not only were you keeping your score, but you're also keeping the guy you're shooting with score, and you had to, figure that out. So he and I start out, and we go first 10 targets, 10 X's all the way through. I mean, we're just bam, 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 dead even with them. And I'm like, it's a habit I have. Like, I tend to shoot, if I'm shooting with somebody who's really good, I tend to focus a lot more. And at least for the first couple of targets, I'm going to like be on my game and try to, what do they call it in sports, where you basically play up to your opponent or play down to your opponent. So like, depending on who and I did that with golf all the time. Like, I used to golf a lot in high school and in college, and shortly after I got out of college, I'd play golf with people, and I would definitely play differently based on the competition I was playing. And so I kind of found myself doing that, and then I had an 8, and he's like, you dropped your bow. Like, he could tell he was watching me, and he's like, you dropped your bow hand. Like, he's like, you need to hold your form longer. And he goes, that's why it's low. Because it was like, boom, it was like, I missed low. I had an 8. And he saw it right away, and he corrected me right away. I was like, okay. And then I did the exact same thing the next target. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, just forget about it. He's like, you had an 8, now you've got another 8. Don't have another one. Shoot a 10. He's like, you just shot like 10 tens in a row. He's like, he goes, I don't know if that's normal for you or not, because he had just met me. Like this is the first time we met. And he's like, I don't know if that's normal for you or not, but if it's not, like, you were on fire. Now all of a sudden you just had 2 8s, and they were very, very correctable things. Like, you dropped your bow arm. Like, it's like nothing's wrong with your equipment. It's totally you. Just, stop doing it. And then I corrected it, and I went on and but he was just like, man, you just got to put it out of your head. Like, quit thinking about it. It's like Michael Jordan, forget, you miss, doesn't matter. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's, you just got to keep going. So.
Yeah, and what I love about archery is it is a competitive sport, but it's kind of competitive against yourself. If you're going to be, unless you're just getting started in it, which, people will recognize from my experiences anyway, if you're just getting started in the sport, there's nobody that's going to put you down. Like, hey, why'd you even show up today? You're not in this caliber of shooters. Like, go home and practice and then come back. It's all giving you pointers and stuff like that. And then if you are shooting, a little bad one day, everybody's like, hey man, you're just having an off day. Or, hey, you're pushing too hard, or you're pulling too hard, or it seems like your release may be set a little bit too stiff, or, something like that, to where everybody's, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's competitive, but especially when you get into some of the upper echelon shooters in the world, they know that if they come in and they shoot their best arrow, they can beat almost anybody. So right. If they're having a bad day, it's their fault. It has nothing to do with you. So if you outshoot them on a day, don't rub it in. I've done that before, and it never goes well because they come back with a vengeance the next time. But it's all in good fun. And these guys that I was shooting with today, I've shot several shoots with them, and they've beat me every single time. And they all like, hey man, you were 2 points out of the money with a bow hunter setup, and here we are, we're shooting 6, 8 power, 4 power lenses and dots and all that. And I'm like, maybe it's just time to buy that kind of stuff, and hopefully, not be 2 points out of it. Which we were a couple today. Today the last 2 arrows didn't go our way. If the last 2 arrows would have been good shots instead of pushing, we were kind of pushing ourselves, and we were shooting ASAs today, and I don't know, if everybody knows what ASA scoring is or IBO scoring, but for those of you that don't know, if you ever go up to a 3D target and you see, 3 little dots inside the 6-inch circle, that 6-inch circle will be the 10 ring, and then the middle, smaller ring will be the IBO 12 ring. And then the ASA 12 rings are the upper and lower. So in ASA scoring, you're always allowed to shoot the lower. But if you want to shoot the upper, you have to call it. So it's kind of tricky, because there's a ton of guys out there that sometimes will be like, well, I called that upper because they pushed their bow hand up and hit it or whatever. But, everybody kind of shuts that down pretty quick, and you kind of learn. I remember there was one year that me and a buddy, we shot the Iowa Bowhunters Association Triple Crown. And I think I was in third and he was in first, something like along those lines. There was a guy in between us. And I had outshot the guy in second in one shoot, and he had outshot me in the second shoot. But the third shoot was the IBA banquet up in Eldora. And anybody that's ever shot that course will tell you it is one of the hardest outdoor 3D courses in the state. So I think I shot like a 406 and a 404 on the last 2 courses. They weren't my best, weren't my best outings, but they were enough. And my buddy was sitting solid in first. I think he shot like a 412 and a 418. And this kid wrote down, because it wasn't for money or anything, it's just kind of for bragging rights. And the person that ended up getting first said that they shot a 442 in Eldora out of 40 targets with 12s. It's out of 480, and everybody looked at that score, and his name is forever etched in everybody's mind as a cheater, because there's absolutely no way that you can go to an easier shoot and shoot a lesser score and shoot your average. Let's say your average is 410, which is awesome. You're shooting 10 points up at 40 targets. That means you shot 5 12s out of 40 targets. Or if you had some 8s in there, if you shot 5 8s, maybe you shot 10 12s. And so that's a pretty good average. But if you say you shot a 442 at the hardest course, like, nobody's going to believe you. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things.
Yeah, and I've shot that course before. I shot their Triple Crown back, it's been 10 or 15 years ago, because our club hosted one of the legs. So up in Clayton County, we hosted one of the legs. And that year, and I think the following year, I shot it. And yeah, their fall festival that they have there in Eldora, I shot it one year. And then the next year I went and shot it. They had this horrific thunderstorm that rolled through, and I'm not kidding you, it took every leaf off of every tree, broke almost all the vehicles that were out there had broken windows. I actually saw it coming on the radar, and I didn't go out onto the course, but people were out on the course in it. And I mean, it was huge hailstones. And when I taught, it littered the ground with hailstones. The wind, the trees blew over. We were underneath the shelter, and I'm not kidding you. I thought, this is going to be how I die, in a tornado, at the IBA Fall Festival. It was crazy. The hailstones were huge. They were disc shaped, and they were probably 2.5 inches in diameter, but they were these disc shaped things. So they came flying in, and they skipped off of stuff, and they're skipping off the cement and hitting you in the back of the legs and everything. It was wild. And when it was all said and done, it was just total devastation. Trees down everywhere. The people were stuck out on the course. Guys huddled over their kids to protect their kids from getting hit, and they had their backs were just covered in pock marks, just bruised up. They had their shirts off, and some of them had to take the shirts off to put around their heads because their head were bleeding, and it was unreal. And I haven't been back to it since then. I don't even know if they moved it from that. It was up there in Eldora at that state park. Can't remember what it's called. But it absolutely defoliated every tree. There wasn't a leaf left on a tree. It looked like it was winter. The soybean field next to it was complete. Looked like somebody hit it with a brush hog. The soybean field just mowed to the ground. And my truck was totaled. Thankfully, my uncle owns a body shop, so I was able to have it fixed, for pretty cheap. But yeah. You hate to see obvious, when it's supposed to be a gentleman's type sport where you're supposed to keep your own score and you're just supposed to be honest about it, and you see something that's so far out of what that person did before, it's hard to, it's just, you question it. It's okay, how did you come to the premier event for this and shoot that much better of a score on a harder course? And everybody, all your competitors who were in the mix are sitting there going, well, that's a head scratcher. And it's too bad, because it's just, I remember these two, my buddies that I used to shoot with all the time, they can't beat a sharp pencil. So I used to always say that.
My buddy that I shot with at that shoot still has not turned in a scorecard to a single shoot since then. Honestly, he's a heck of a shot. kind of about the same as me. Um, and he's like, you know what? Ever since then, I kind of lost interest in, turning in the scorecard. It's not like we're winning anything, um,
Yeah.
other than bragging rights. And honestly, the biggest reason that I got into it to start out with and stayed in bow hunter class was it was all unknown yardage.
Right.
And when you're in the middle of a field and you don't have time, especially, us that are filming, you don't have time to run a rangefinder and a camera and a bow and everything else. So it just teaches you that extra element that helps you in the woods. And when I started out, my scores were horrific. And it wasn't because I wasn't a good shot, because honestly, when I was younger, I was a heck of a lot better shot than I am now. And it was just because I simply could not guess yardage. This target may be at 22 yards, and I'd think it was at 28, and I'd shoot a 5.
Yeah.
And, vice versa. Then the next one I'd walk up to, I was like, oh, that I made this mistake before. It's 22 yards, and it was actually 27 or 28, and it just did that for quite a long time. And then I felt myself starting to get better and starting to get better. And to this day, if it's inside of 40 yards and we're on the same plane, now being in a tree stand kind of makes it a little bit different. But if we're on the same plane, I can be within a couple yards usually, within 40. Once you get out to that, 50 to 80 range, I'm not great at it. So I still carry a rangefinder, and if I have time, I use it. The deer hunts that I was on this last year, I did not have time to use it, whether it be my deer hunt or Courtney's deer hunt. Um, but and part of me would like a little bit of that back. She actually ended up missing a buck, and I'm not too sure that I might not have told her a few extra yards. Whether it would have changed anything, I don't know. Um, Unfortunately, I found that deer dead the first time I went shed hunting. Probably about a 140-inch 10-pointer would have been a heck of a deer for her to finish on, or to start her hunting career on, especially with her bow. But that's, things happen. Whether it be I misjudged the yardage and told her wrong, or just simply buck fever. Who knows? But she has taken it in such a good way, because I always try and tell people you learn the most from your mistakes. So she ended up not having a good hunt that day, and the first thing she said to me when we got to the truck is she's like, "Hey, I want to get a new bow because I don't feel like this one's really serving me, and I want to start either find a woman's league somewhere around, or I want to start shooting an archery league because I want to get comfortable in it to where I feel like I can make that shot every single time." And I said, you know what? I think you're 100% right. So we bought her an Expedition DLX, and she's going to be shooting the crap out of it this year. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, it's going to go one or two ways when people experience that disappointment. That first bit of failure, and either they're going to be driven to be better, and like, I need to make some changes. I need to get better, get more comfortable with this. It's like one of those things where, there's a saying that I came across when I started losing weight and started working out and started running and doing all that kind of stuff. And the saying basically says, don't be upset with the results that you didn't get from the work that you didn't do. And to me, it's like, it just kind of clicked. It's like, yeah, like, even like when you think back to like some of the unfortunate things that might have happened during a hunt or during a 3D archery shoot or something along those lines. And it's like, okay, were they just a freak thing? Because sometimes that happens. Like, let's be honest. Like, sometimes there's just things that happen that, hey, it just wasn't your day and it didn't happen. Or if you're, or look at it and say, was there something that I could have done that maybe would have prepared me better and I wouldn't have had the adverse outcome? So I think back to me personally, some of my missed opportunities, whether that was on a deer or a turkey, I look at some of those missed opportunities and I think, if I would have shot my bow more often, been more familiar with my bow, in that situation, in that scenario, I would have, been successful when I had that opportunity. And it really talks, people talk about people who are lucky, and I have this thing on my Facebook tag that says luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So when you've prepared for something and the opportunity arises and you capitalize on that, it's not because you were lucky. Like, you can manufacture luck. Like, people that find success a lot, that are very, very successful, whether that's in the hunting woods, whether that's hunting deer, turkeys, whether that's shooting, playing any kind of sport whatsoever, they didn't get there and they weren't successful because they were lucky. They were successful because they prepared. And that preparation, whether it's practice or whatever the case may be, heck, you can take preparation to the level of, trail cameras, scouting, shooting your bow, of course, is practice. But bottom line is there's so many levels and layers of preparation. When it comes to turkey hunting, I talk about it in my turkey hunting seminars. Like, did you scout? Did you shoot your gun? Did you check and make sure it's still on? Did you check it? Are you shooting your bow? If you're going to archery hunt, are you going to shoot your bow often enough to be able to make that shot? And as hunters, we think, oh yeah, I'm gonna definitely be ready for that opportunity. But, when something happens that's not exactly to the script, and you have to maybe make an off balance, shot, or take a shot where maybe you're like, I was forced to sit down to take a shot in a tree stand because of a limb from the direction the buck came this year. The limb that was in the way, I could not stand and shoot my bow that to my left. I could shoot straight out in front of me and I could shoot to my right standing, but I could not shoot to my left. And to be honest, not that many deer came from my left, but the buck eventually did come from my left with a bunch of other deer. And I knew I'd have to sit to make that shot. Well, drawing your bow in a seated position when you're cold is a lot different than drawing your bow standing in your normal position in the summer. So,
absolutely.
I actually had drawn my bow sitting a couple of times while I hunted that stand a lot this year. I killed a coyote actually sitting. I think it was November 8th or something like that. I killed a coyote, came from the left, and I had to be seated when I drew. And when I did that, I knew, like, that's a whole different thing. And so I actually started practicing. So I shoot every morning. I do, I think you call it blind bale shooting. I'll let you talk about that here in a minute. But I do basically what people would call blind bale shooting, or I actually aim. I use my 40-yard pin. I'm about 4 yards from the target. I use my 50-yard pin on this bow. And so I aim with my 50-yard pin, and I'm trying to pick out the tiniest thing on a target, aiming small to miss small. And really what I'm doing is I'm doing the blind bale thing where I'm trying to just get that muscle memory back, get a good draw cycle, and then get a good clean release, because I shoot a trigger release. And so just trying to get that so I'm not punching the trigger or anything like that, and just trying to get a nice, good, clean release. And so that then when it happens in the woods, it's just automatic, right? So I do that in the morning after I work out. I at least shoot 3 to 5 arrows doing that, and sometimes more, but I do that for sure every morning. And what that does is I started doing that sitting down, because as soon as I shot that coyote, I realized that's a whole different motion, and it wasn't something I was exactly ready for, and it almost cost me killing that coyote, because I got to about here and my arm was still bent, and I was starting to hit the back of the seat or the tree that was behind me, and I had to push my bow arm out, and I was like, wow, that took a lot to get to lockout. Like, to get that to lock out the way I wanted it to was seemed much more difficult than I anticipated it was going to be. And I was like, whoops. And then I just turned and got the shot off, and I killed the coyote right where he was. I mean, he just, boom, done. But the possibility of that fail was very real in that moment, and I recognized that. So then I started sitting on my the stools to shoot, to kind of help me get used to that motion and make sure that I was able to do that. And then it was about 20 days later that I finally killed my buck in a seated position, and so and it was, again, it was a little sketchy. Like, I went to draw back, and I was like, oh no, this is good. Like, I got to get it. You got to get it back, you know? So it's one of those things, like, you know, I'm not shooting a heavy pounded bow, you know. I mean, it's 70-pound bow. It's probably actually measures out at about 73. So it's a little heavy, but it's not like some of these guys that are shooting 80 and 90-pound limbs. I mean, I'm not doing something crazy like that, but still, I think the draw cycle in that MX32 is just it's so much different than the draw cycle was in the MX16, at least for me. And with my long draw length, it's a completely different, the way it builds, and it really has a really it's nice to have that drop over, but it builds, and then it comes over. But it's that peak weight is right at the end. It's not at the beginning, and that weight does build pretty good at it. Love the bow and that kind of stuff, but that draw cycle is much different than MX16 was. And the new 33s that they've got coming, it's a 33, right?
Yep.
The X-Lite?
33 and a 31.
Yeah, the X-Lite, those new bows, shot that at the Deer Classic a couple weeks ago, and you talk about an beautiful draw. Like, that bow might be the sweetest drawing bow that I maybe have ever shot. Like,
yeah, I don't know that I've ever been so in love with a bow after like 3 shots.
Yeah,
like when I get that thing in my hand, I don't know that I'm ever going to give it up.
Yeah, so I drew that thing, and it reminds me almost of, like, I had, like, when I first started 3D archery, I had an old Martin Moab. And the Martin Moab was a single cam bow. And at that time, I had never shot a really nice flagship bow, right? Like, I had shot like some reflexes and some cheaper brands and that kind of stuff. And so I had that Martin Moab, and I started shooting that, and it was a single cam bow, and I never shot anything but dual cam bows before that. So I was like, man, this thing's sweet. It's super smooth. And so it kind of reminds me of that. It's a binary cam though. And so it's a beautiful shooting bow. I can't wait till my X-Lite comes in. Because not that it's funny, I didn't want to give up my MX32. Like, even though it was a different draw, it was a really good shooting bow, like very accurate, and really did a lot for me that way. But we kind of went down a rabbit hole. We were talking about, we can come back and talk about those bows here in a minute, but we were kind of talking about just kind of digging yourself out of the hole and not, you know, and just making sure that you prepare, you know, to be successful. And that's one of the things that, you know, I think doesn't, you know, those guys that are, you know, world champions at anything, doesn't matter if it's turkey calling, doesn't matter if it's archery, you know, the guys that are the best of the best and that kind of stuff, they are definitely putting in the work. And so unless you're one of those guys, you can probably do more work to be better. And, you know, I mean, we all have our limitations, time, you know, limitations and that kind of stuff, where we have commitments, you know. Everybody on the Victory Outdoors, you know, team, we have day jobs. Like, none of us do this Victory Outdoor stuff as our job. I mean, you know, this is the side hustle, right? But we all have day jobs. A lot of us have families and kids, or have significant others and wives and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, we have other things that take time that we have to commit time to. And so you do have some limitations that way. But I mean, that's like where for me, and I talked about this on one of our other podcasts. For me, like getting up at 4:30 in the morning is not something I thought I'd ever do in order to get my workout in, shoot my bow, and read my Bible. But of those three things, those were three things that I would otherwise not do on a daily basis if it wasn't for getting up and having the discipline to get out of bed when that alarm goes off at 4:30. Those aren't things that I would do underneath my normal day because I wouldn't have time for it. And the only time I do have for it is that early. So for me personally, that's how I have to attack that. Like if I want to set that goal and I'm going to be better at something, and it's like, okay, what do I, and I like to call them healthy habits because like it becomes a habit, and you can have all the motivation in the world you want. Like people can motivate you to do stuff. You can hear a motivational speech and it'll last for a couple of days, maybe only a couple of hours. You can listen to a motivational video or whatever the case may be, and it might motivate you to some degree. But motivation, like, and you've probably heard this if you've listened to any kind of motivational type stuff, but that motivation is more of an emotion, like it comes and goes. But if you can build that healthy habit and you can start to build on those healthy habits. And so mine was interesting. It first became like, Carrie and I kind of started working at losing weight. And so I'm like, okay, honey, if you do it, I'll do it. But like, she did it for a month. And then it's like, then I jumped into it like a month after she had proven that she could do it for a month. And it's like, all right, well, I guess if she can do it, I can do it. So it's almost like she was like, had to be the example for me. But one of the things that was interesting is that was a healthy habit that became, it just became a normal thing that we did. We didn't eat out. We didn't eat garbage food, and we meal planned. We just eating healthy, but it was mostly geared around just planning ahead. So you could save time by just basically planning, doing some cooking maybe on a Sunday or a Monday, get some stuff done, get it ready for that whole week so that you knew what you're going to be able to eat, and you wouldn't sit there and go, oh, let's just fire up the old, Grubhub or whatever and get something ordered or something like that, So, that was one aspect of it. So then I wanted to start working out. I was like, okay, that's going to be a whole different ball game, right? And started out with working out, and then I'm like, well, while I'm up, might as well read my Bible. So then I started doing that because I wanted to be better at it. I just like I'd meet with some of my guys, that I go to church with and stuff like that. We have these, we have men's breakfasts, and we have just some times where we just get together just to have coffee, like one-on-one, iron sharpens iron type of thing, right? Just, talk about life and that kind of stuff. And they'd always ask me like, well, how's your, are you getting your reading in? Are you doing any, reading your Bible at all? If so, what are you reading? It's like, yeah, it could be better. Like that'd be my answer. My standard answer, like, it could be better, which they knew that it meant I wasn't, that I wasn't getting into the word like I should. Right. And I mean, if that's, and that's important to some people, it's not necessarily important to everybody, but if you are a Christian, you understand, that importance. So that was just something, again, just a healthy habit. And then that spilled over to shoot my bow. I was like, you know what? Like, I could also shoot my bow after I get done working out. So, I'd spend between 40 minutes to an hour on the treadmill, get my run in, maybe lift some weights and that kind of stuff, hit the Bible, which I do on my phone. I got a Bible app, so just do it on my phone. And then while I was actually doing the Bible stuff, in between that, I would be shooting my bow. So, it's kind of one of those things. It was like kind of multitask a little bit to some degree. And just being able to do that and build those healthy habits, although I didn't see something where it remarkably turned, like that little tiny bit of recognizing when I shot that coyote that, oh, maybe I should practice sitting down more because it's a different motion. Just being able to, take that little lesson, it made it more likely that I'd be successful that next time, which the next time I had to shoot to my left, sitting down, happened to be a 155-inch 6-year-old buck. And, I made a okay shot. Wasn't a perfect shot by any means. Should have been better. I feel like it should have been better, but it was one of those things where you're sitting down, and the deer's walking from my left to my right, and by the time I get clear where I have an open shot opportunity at him, where he's got open vitals, I'm now like this, and so, as it were, I ended up hitting him. He was also walking. I didn't really want to stop him because I had about 6 does right there staring at me. So I thought if I made any sound at all, they might blow out of there and take him with. So I just took the shot as he was walking.
That's always controversial.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody has their own way. I meet so many archers. One of them is our good friend Chris. He sights his bow in low for those deer to actually jump the string, and
Zach does too.
I feel like, if that deer is close enough and not on a trot or anything like that, I don't want them to know that I'm there.
Yeah.
I feel like if the deer has no idea that you're there, most of the time, they don't have the time. Now, granted, there's always that chance. That's why, as a bow hunter, everybody has their own spot that they like to aim at. But, I usually go about 3 inches off the shoulder to where you're in the center of the lung and center of the body. That way I have plenty of margin for error, whether the error be me or the deer moving or whatever the case may be. But, it's funny, I shot my deer on a walk this year too. And I've had plenty of people like, well, why didn't you stop him? I'm like, well, because he looked right at me at 25 yards making a scrape when I already had to shuffle my feet in the tree stand to turn around to shoot. And I didn't want him to have any other inkling to just take off running, or maybe he stares at me and that arrow doesn't get there fast enough. Today's bows are fast, but they're not deer fast. No. So I wanted him to be as calm as possible, and I've had it work both ways. In a couple of years ago, it's been a few, I guess, but if he would have ducked, I would have had a very large deer on the wall. And this deer just didn't move at all. And I stand by that. And I also, guys like Chris and Zach, they have their ways of doing it. And it's definitely not the wrong way, because it works for them. Obviously,
right,
they're both excellent shots and excellent deer killers. But I always like to get people's feedback. So, if anybody wants to hit up the comments about stopping deer or not stopping deer and your reasoning why, I would definitely love to read it and see, what your answers are, because I'm genuinely curious on what people's answers are and why they do what they do, because ultimately we can all learn from each other.
Yeah. So you mentioned, the bows are fast, but they're not deer fast. And, it's funny, like I remember, when we talk about arrow selection and guys that shoot really, really, really light arrows because they want to get that max speed, that max IBO speed, they're looking at the bow and they're like, oh, my bow should be an IBO of, 360. And I'm like, you realize there's not any discernible difference between 300 and 360 when it comes to that deer hearing, because the speed of sound is 1125. So 1,125 feet per second is how fast sound travels. Well, I got news for you. There's no compound bow in the world that's going to come close to that, no matter how light your arrow is. And so the sound is always going to reach the deer. Now, there's something that comes into that factors into it, the deer's ability then to react to it. So their reaction time There's also going to be a little bit of a lag there, obviously, because the sound has to come in, process through their brain, and they have to react their body to do it. But you've seen, like in slow-mo video, like you can see how fast a deer reacts to it because they don't think. And I've said this on a couple of podcasts now, I think, about, and I talk about it in different seminars that I do. We as humans put human characteristics on animals. And so they don't, they don't process it. They just, it's kind of like when somebody jumps out and scares you from around the corner and you flinch, and you have a reaction. You do that purely out of a reactionary state. There is nothing other than just your initial reaction, no matter what that might be. That's why sometimes people get punched in the face.
It's instinctual. I mean,
Yeah.
your brain doesn't have time to process it.
Exactly. That's the word I was
100%.
looking for. That's the word I was looking for. Instinct. I mean, they do that on instinct. So a deer's going to do that. They're going to react to the sound of the bow in some form or fashion. And you can try to make them as quiet as possible. You can do all the things you need to do. You can try to shoot the fastest setup you can. And that's fine, but the amount that you're going to change that margin for error, that's why people like Chris and Zach do that. That's why they set up their bows to shoot low, because they're shooting, they call it shooting for the drop. So you're going to basically set up and you're going to talk about, like, I expect that deer at a certain yardage to have that flinch and have that drop. And so, like, Zach's philosophy on it, because I've talked to Zach about it a lot. So his philosophy on it is okay, I come to full draw and I'm going to shoot. Then I want, like, he aims right at the heart. And he is basically set up that his pin, no matter what it is, will be about an inch low. Sometimes 2 inches low, depending on which pin we're talking about. But for the most part, it's like an inch low. He aims at the heart, and so his thought process is there. If that deer drops 2 inches, he's still going to cut the top of the heart off. If that deer drops 4 inches, he's still going to double lung that deer, because right above the top of the heart is going to be all lungs. And there should be not really any chance that a deer, between the time you release the arrow and it gets dropped, no matter how fast the reaction time is, that they should probably get to where they'll duck out of there by, where they're gonna be able to get out of the way of the arrow. Now, there's some extreme scenarios where I've seen some crazy things, but a lot of times when you see like a deer duck a string and it's like it's out there at that 40 to 60 yard range, like it's a long shot, and the longer the shot, the more time that deer has to react to the sound, because you're obviously, the further away you are, the longer it takes the arrow to get there, but the sound's there infinitely sooner, and so that deer has a chance to react. And I know that, like, not necessarily in Zach's situation, but Chris, he does practice regularly at 100 and 120 yards. Now, he doesn't kill very many deer at those ranges, but he does practice a lot at super, super long ranges. So if he's going to even take a 60-yard shot, which for him would not be out of that realm of possibility, to take that kind of shot, and that, like if you're shooting at 120 yards, a lot of times people believe in this, if you're going to shoot 20 yards, then you should at least practice out to 40, because then it just helps you be that much better. So if you're going to shoot out to 40, you should probably practice at least 80, because if you're shooting at 80 and you can be somewhat proficient, it's going to make that 40 yard that much easier. So kind of doubling that maximum yardage. So if whatever your maximum is going to be, double that, and then you should be able to practice out to that range. It'll just make your effective. If you're going to shoot at 60, well, you could practice at 120 then. So that's kind of a little bit of the philosophy there. But, a 60-yard shot is a long ways. Even on a completely relaxed animal, they're going to have some kind of reaction. So it kind of makes sense that they're going to aim low. But those are things that you know you're expecting that drop, and some deer are going to react differently than others, and I mean, some people would say like I'm never going to take that shot, and I don't know that I would. I I know that I took a 50-yard shot, this last year, and I mean, it was the most beautiful arrow ever. I even like watching it. It's like I missed, like, and it's not a fun thing to miss, but it was a clean miss. And I sit there and watch that arrow just flying through the air, and it looks so perfect. And that deer, it drops, and I'm thinking, oh yes, it's going to drop right into there. It's going to be perfect, and it misses low. And I'm like, how in the world? And so what I ended up figuring out is the deer, I thought he was at 45 to 50, so I held my 50 at the bottom of his belly. Well, he was actually at 55. And I had ranged him, but I had ranged him before his last move, and he had walked, and I didn't realize that he'd walked back further than he was. Like, he was in a pasture. So he went behind an oak tree, came out on the other side of an oak tree. He's with a doe, hot doe. And it's funny because the arrow hits and they jump, but they just stare at the loom knock. So there's a loom knock on there, and they're just staring at that lit knock. And they're like, what is that? And they're just kind of looking at it, and the doe goes up and licks it. It's like, I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, I'm scrambling trying to get another arrow, and I'm thinking, like, because then all of a sudden this buck starts chasing off small bucks and everything, and I'm like, he was probably one of the funnest, 100% last year, other than the day that I killed my deer. For sure, that was the most fun all-day sit hunt that I had, and it ended in a miss, and I did not get a second opportunity. I could have probably taken a poorly advised shot. It was really close to dark, still barely had camera light, had the deer in the frame, and I was going to draw, but I could not tell I have better eyesight apparently than you do, Jake, but I could not tell, even with my eyesight, I could not tell whether or not there were sticks and stuff in the way. It was getting to that point where you start to kind of be able to lose beyond, 30 yards or 40 yards. You can't see smaller twigs and stuff like that. So I wasn't 100% sure that I had an open shot opportunity like I had, probably 5 minutes before that. The light had changed so much in that last 5 minutes that it was like I wasn't confident that I was going to make a good shot. And I was like, this is a 170-inch 10-point, it would have been by far my biggest archery buck. And I'm like, I'm not going to take the shot. Like, this deer's here. I missed him, but he's not spooked at all. He's fully focused on that doe. He's fully focused on keeping these smaller bucks away from her. I'm just going to wait until dark. And so I started to slowly pack up my stuff and just kind of chill. But, you talk about like just being positive, and just like, that could have gone a different way. Like, your soon to be wife, Courtney, she was mad, right? Like, she was upset and she was mad, but she didn't let that deter her from wanting to get better. She let that, fuel her to get better. And she's going to be, she's coming back with a vengeance this fall, and she's going to drop one. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, when you look at it from that perspective, I could have gone a different way. Like, I could have pouted and been mad or tried to force a shot because, but I was just in awe. I had a beautiful day, watched a ton of deer chasing does, saw every single buck I had on trail camera that day, including the buck that I ended up killing. He ran off the buck that I had passed on November 2nd. And I mean, you just talk about having a great day in the stand. Sure, it ended on a miss, but it was a clean miss, and the buck didn't get spooked. And it's like, you know what? Like, I saw that deer on trail camera throughout the rest of the entire year. He just didn't come to that side of the farm. He stayed on the other side of the farm, which I could have hunted it, but I didn't have that side of the farm set up to really bow hunt as easy. It's more, that side of the farm is more set up to gun hunt. And so, yeah, I mean, you talk about just trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Like, man, I mean, I'm excited for Courtney and to see what, to see what she's able to do next year. Cause I mean, she definitely has the drive and want. And I mean, speaking of that, I mean, she killed a turkey with her bow last year, right?
With a gun. It was
That's right. That's a gun. Yep.
First turkey ever.
First turkey.
It was actually the first animal that we had shot off of our home farm. We were lucky enough last year that we found a place that was within our price range before inflation. Kind of a struggle now, but it was within our price range. It's a beautiful 20-acre place, and last year we basically spent the entire year trying to make that place what we wanted it to be. Kind of what we envisioned. Because I put up a bunch of reveals. We bought it in January. I was like, man, shed season's coming up. I have a big buckbrush field in the back that I had dreams of a food plot and all these things. And I think I got one buck on reveal between like January and March. And I was kind of in awe because granted, I'm kind of surrounded by hayfields and CRP, but I have the bulk of the timber, where the big timber draws kind of all come together. And I just wasn't seeing the amount of deer that I was thinking. And I sure wasn't seeing the turkeys. And as turkey season kind of came along, I started seeing more turkeys and I started hearing more turkeys, but they were, kind of roosted on, neighboring properties. But, she kind of made it a point that she wanted to try turkey hunting this year. And, those of you that know me know that I have a couple properties, one that I can't hunt anymore, but I spent a long time trying to figure out how to turkey hunt it because there's a ton of birds there. And now that I've figured it out, like I'm going to milk that until I can't milk it anymore. So I kind of let her have first dibs, and she did really, really well. I told her, because we were actually going to peanut oil that turkey. Like, I don't really like oven roasted turkey, just personally. I like to peanut oil them, on a fryer. And those of you that haven't tried it, I recommend looking it up and trying it at least once. But I told her, I said, if you don't shoot this turkey in the head, you have to pick out every BB out of the breast, because I'm not doing it. And that motivated her. And if you slow-mo the video, it is absolutely amazing. The wad of that shell out of my youth 20 gauge that I've had for 20 years is going right for that turkey's head. And she smoked him, made an awesome shot. We had actually a pretty cool experience after that hunt. I had actually called in a hen that we didn't know about, and we were still in the blind, and next thing you know, the hen's in the decoy and, playing with the tom, and then called in another tom, and it was pretty cool. I think this year's going to be pretty exciting with the work that we did last year. We mowed a bunch of that buckbrush down, created a really nice 2-acre food plot that we're going to expand on this year. I think it's going to be a strut zone. So I'm pretty excited to see what our farm will do this year. And as we improve and make the habitat what we know it can be, the bigger caliber of deer will come in. But I had a blast. I shot my deer like the 28th of October, something like that. And
early. You always never. You guys, like, I don't know. Some of those guys on the team, like Drexel and you, that tend to like kill out in October. Like, none of us ever seem to get that accomplished.
That's because I swear that some of the does that are on my places just never come into heat. Or, the big bucks are just missing it. So, big bucks, there's does in my area. Come on, let's go. Because it seems like I had on my home place, I got to hunt it pretty much all through the rut. And I had one 8-pointer that, he was a nice buck, but just not something that I wanted to go after, and it so happened that my neighbor, it was the biggest buck that he's been seeing, and that was his target buck. And I ended up actually, working with him on where to go on the farm that he could hunt, and he ended up killing that deer, which, I was super happy for him. I'm not one of those guys that says just because it's not what I want to chase doesn't mean that it's not somebody else's dream.
Right.
Some people want to go on an elk hunt or want to go on a mule deer hunt. Just because I don't want to do it doesn't mean that it's not your dream. And
Right.
a lot of people don't have 20 deer, in the house. And if I start bringing in, ones that aren't worth, or to me aren't, the same caliber as the deer that I have on the wall, my fiance might kill me.
Well, and so it's interesting. Like, we're fortunate here in Iowa to basically, honestly, like, if you're a bow hunter in Iowa, in most cases, you will get an opportunity to kill a Pope and Young deer, which is 125 inches. So it's got to be a clean 125 inches. So in most cases, if you're hunting in Iowa, you probably will get an opportunity at a deer that's somewhere in that range. Now, it might only be 115, to 125, maybe 130. But I mean, there's a lot to be said for, that isn't the normal. I mean, like, you get outside of Iowa, and if you're a bow hunter, like say in Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or something like that, you are not going to get that kind of opportunity every single year. And so, I think sometimes people that are from different parts of the country, they have maybe a skewed vision of what Iowa is. I mean, we do not have 170-inch deer walking around everywhere. Do we have more of
140, 150s?
Well, I mean, do we have more than other places? Probably. Is your likelihood to kill one higher here? Yeah, but I've been bow hunting in Iowa for almost 20 years, and my biggest buck to date is 165 inches. So, and actually 163 and change. So it's not even, I mean, and I killed that back in 2012, and I killed a lot of deer since then, but here the last couple of years, I've really focused on trying to break my personal best. Haven't done it yet. I've killed a couple of good, really mature bucks. Back in 2020, I killed a really nice, mature, at least 5.5-year-old buck, that heavy horns, but he only went mid 150s. And then the next year in 2021, I ended up killing. I hunted until the got into Thanksgiving. I think it was the day after Thanksgiving. I ended up killing just a 130-inch 8-pointer. It was like, man, I want to put a deer in the freezer. It's shotgun season next week, and there's a bunch of bucks that came through, and it's like, I'm gonna take this deer because on that particular lease, it was probably a 3-year-old 8-pointer, but on that farm, he's never gonna be anything other than an 8-pointer. So, was he what I was after? No, but I was happy with him. I was pumped. I was happy. I had a successful season. I had hunted a lot. Last year, same thing. Really wanted to break my own personal best. Ended up shooting a mid 150s, 6.5-year-old, 9-pointer. And I mean, he's a great deer. I mean, he was a bruiser. I mean, I watched him, stomp up to other bucks that were 4.5 and 5.5-year-olds and turn them around. He was kind of the big bully on the block. He was the most mature buck that I had on trail camera. I'm pretty sure that 170-inch 10 was probably a 5-year-old. So I'm pretty sure that this buck was older than that deer. Obviously the 10-pointer lived, so he made it all the way through the season, and looking forward to finding his sheds hopefully. But he's a deer that next year could just be a giant. Hard to know. Like, when they get to be older like that, they don't make as big of jumps. But looking forward to seeing what he turns into and possibly hunting that deer. But, we kind of joked with Ian about it in the first podcast about, we're talking about, I think Ian called the deer he shot this year a dink. It's like, dude, it's 160 plus inch deer that you called a dink. It's like, like that only happens in Iowa. Like nobody, he wasn't being serious, but in reference to the fact that Zach, killed a 210 inch, monster. You killed a 170 inch stud. Was that your personal best?
That is, and
Yeah.
For example, it took me 21 years to break the 170.
Yeah.
And it took me, I think, 17 to break 150. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that I believe you grow and mature as a bow hunter, and sometimes it wasn't the ground I was hunting, it wasn't anything like that. It was the fact that I couldn't pass 130, and that's why I didn't shoot a 150. Or some years I just didn't get the opportunity. But along those same lines that you're talking, as long as the hunter's happy, I'm always happy for the hunter. It doesn't matter if it's a fork buck. If you come to me and you have those stars in your eyes, and we all know that look,
Yep.
I'm happy for you. It doesn't matter if you're my neighbor or if you hunt in Arkansas. I'm happy for you. I'll never put down another hunter for what they decide to kill, because ultimately it's not my decision and we don't own any of them. So what's the point?
And be proud of it. Like, to those guys that feel like if you were happy when you pulled the trigger and you walk up to it and you're pumped, and then then you take pictures and you look at the pictures and you're like, what are people going to say on social media? Who cares? Like, and honestly, don't be that guy on social media that, that does run somebody down because of the size of the deer. Like, you know what? Like, that's not what, trophy management, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of stuff. Like, you can work with your neighbors to have a common understanding, even with your friends, and that kind of stuff. And a buddy of mine from Northeast Iowa, made this comment to me several years ago when we used to shotgun hunt together. And, I'm like, well, because I made a comment to him, like, what if I shoot one of your target bucks that you want to live until next year? Like, because we were shotgun deer hunting his, home farm and that kind of stuff. And it's like, are there deer that are off limits? And he's like, no, not really. He's like, but there's a couple of deer that if you get the opportunity, if you think about it, if you let them walk, that'd be great, because they're going to be a monster next year. But hey, if you're happy and you want to shoot it, shoot it. And I said, are you sure, man? Like, I don't want to make you mad. And he goes, no deer is worth a friendship, worth ruining a friendship over. And that's one thing that kind of stuck with me. Like, he genuinely said, like, no deer is worth it. And he's right. Like, there's not a deer out there, I don't care how big it is, that's worth ruining a friendship over. And so many people lose sight of that. They get so worked up. And it doesn't, even if they're not friends, but just somewhat friendly with your neighbors, and they just ruin that relationship because they berate them for killing their target buck for next year. I've heard some crazy stories out there, and it's like, get a grip, people. Like, it's supposed to be, a fun activity. And as soon as we start putting so much pressure on ourselves to kill the next 200-inch deer and that kind of stuff, like, just be happy, and if you are fortunate enough to even be hunting deer of that caliber, think about how fortunate you are, because not everybody has the ability to hunt 170, 180, 190, or 200-inch deer like we do in Iowa. And I try to prepare myself. We talked about preparation earlier. I do. I want to be prepared every time I sit in that tree stand. I want to mentally prepare myself to and have physically prepared myself, whether I shoot my bow, whatever the case may be, But I want to at least have my mental state to where I'm ready to kill a 200-inch deer. If it walks out, I'm not crapping my pants, and freaking out that I'm going to make a mistake. I just, go into Terminator mode and, just make the shot, right? Just everything kind of, at least for me, I don't get the shakes. I don't get the buck fever and that kind of stuff until after I release the arrow. It's the way I've always been. Like, people talk about, like, oh, I'd be shaking. It's like, man, I don't get rattled. Like, even when it's turkeys and stuff, like, I hear those turkeys gobbling and that kind of stuff, and they're coming in and closing the distance. My heart's pounding. Don't get me wrong. That heart's beating, and I can feel it. But I have a, I stay calm, and I just chill and make the shot. And I've had times where I've rushed a shot, or forced a shot, maybe is a better way to say it. Taken a shot that I shouldn't have taken. Luckily, that's not bitten me too many times, but I've even heard, Cameron Haynes talk about it. There's been some times where, maybe because he does shoot as often as he does, that maybe he forced a shot that he shouldn't have forced, because he knows he can make that shot, but he also knows it's a little bit iffy, but he takes the shot anyway. And those are some of the times where he said, like, he had, like, that's one that I wish I would have had back. Like, if I have any kind of, not necessarily a regret, but maybe I would have not put that pressure on so much. That was in his last book, his new book, Endure. And so, that was, one of the things I took away from that particular book when I read it was, there's definitely, I can think back to some times where I maybe forced a shot that I shouldn't have. Yeah, so kind of like what you were talking about there, maturing as a bow hunter. It's just something that as we kind of grow, and we find those experiences when it makes sense to, maybe not force the arrow, maybe not force the issue, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily won't at times find yourself like, but it's having the awareness to understand that, okay, maybe next time I shouldn't, force that arrow. So really think that that's something that is important as bow hunters. If you can at least recognize, have that self-awareness, to know how to react to certain situations, just to be better. It makes you, it's kind of like not thinking that you're, that you've got it all figured out, because none of us do. Doesn't matter what aspect of life you're talking about. Like, you can always learn and you can always get better at something. And I mean, you'll find this out when you're married. Like, you can always be better at everything.
And, it ties right back into maybe next year you prepare a little bit more. If you had to force a shot through some sticks or something like that, and, maybe it bit you or maybe it didn't, next year you're like, okay, I'm either going to move this stand over to this area where I can still shoot here, or I'm going to do a little bit more trimming, or, it helps you learn. And every failure, if you look at it, and it doesn't matter what you're talking about, life or bow hunting, every failure, if you look at it as such and don't find the positives and the learning opportunities in it, then you're just never going to get better at anything, and you're just going to complain forever about how you're not good at things.
Yeah.
And I can't stand to be around those kinds of people. I've tried to surround myself, the Victory Outdoors group included, in people that are positive, and I think that are just happier people because of it. You just, and some of it comes with, as you get further on into life, I have found out, but you just start to look at things from a different lens of, learning from those missed opportunities. Even, if it was a successful hunt, the blind eye deer that, Ian thought that there was absolutely no way I could shoot through that stuff. And I basically found a little tiny hole, and I was confident in it, and I took it. Granted, I made an excellent shot. Now, I took a picture of that night, and I'm like, there's absolutely no way I should have got an arrow through there.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, and I mean,
So
and that's the thing. Like, I mean, you know your limits, you know what you can take, and you made the shot. And some other people might have not have been confident enough to take the shot. That's fine. Like, it's a very personal thing. Like, knowing your personal limits when it comes to archery or anything, whether it's with a rifle or a shotgun or whatever the case may be. Um, Being able to know, what you're comfortable with and what you can and can't be successful with doing, is part of hunting. And some of it, hopefully not a lot of it, you have to learn the hard way. But sometimes you do. And, to speak on, like kind of surrounding yourself with, like-minded people, there's a saying, you are the company you keep. I think it's really important for high school kids, young adults, to hear that. I know as a young adult, like there was times where I surrounded myself with people that I probably shouldn't have been hanging out with. I had no business hanging out with. They were into stuff that I shouldn't, that I wasn't necessarily into. I was just hanging out with them because, they were like the cool kids or whatever. And, but, like it kind of goes with the, when you're in elementary school, guilty by association, like you're standing with a group of kids that threw rocks at somebody, you're probably going to be in trouble, because you were in that group. You may not have been picking up rocks and throwing them at, the other class, but, you are the company you keep. And man, I mean, it's crazy. Like it's, in some cases it's life or death. You get to be older. Like it's one thing on a playground to teach your kids that. It's another thing to be hanging out with the wrong people and, somebody does something crazy, and now either you're put in a life-threatening situation or your freedom is put in question because now you're guilty by association of some other crazy crime. Now I know we're getting real deep here, but yeah, we're way down that rabbit hole. But bottom line is, it can go that far, and that's like, with the guys at Victory Outdoors and stuff like that, I'm super selective in, who I choose, to bring on and who's on the team. And there's people that have come and gone, and by no means do the people that have left the team. Some of them, just, they didn't have time, to devote to it. Some of them wanted to do their own thing, and that kind of thing. And that's perfectly fine. Like I mean, we've all been there before. I have kids now. Like when I started Victory Outdoors, I didn't have kids, and so my reality is different than it was when I first started out doing this. And because of that, my commitment to my family and that kind of stuff is something that has to be considered when I start laying out a hunt schedule, right? Like I can't just decide I'm going to hunt 6 states for turkeys like I used to. Like that's not going to work with raising children, So that's something that, having guys that are understanding of that, they understand, that kind of stuff. Either they've been through it or they're currently going through it, or they're just good dudes that understand, like, hey, the guys who have kids or who have, they can't, drop everything and necessarily run out and help, as much as I'd love to put my hands on it. Like you're one of the guys that, some of the other, like Ian or somebody like that might call up and say, hey man, can you come help me drag a deer? And you're like, I'm already in the truck, type of thing.
Absolutely.
But like sometimes, like depending on what's going on in my life, like I might not be able to get out. Like I might be closer than even you are at times. And it's like, man, I'd love to, but like I'm in the middle of getting these kids to bed. Like, like I can't come out and help right now.
Well,
but
you and I ran into it
yeah.
this year. When Courtney missed was actually the same day that you killed, and you had called me the night before, and you had asked, do you want to come run camera? And I, as much as it pained me to say, like I promised Courtney that we'd go in the morning, you know, but to have that experience, and you know, you did a wonderful job of getting it all, you know, on film and everything by yourself, which is a feat in
Yeah.
itself. So congratulations on that.
Well, I saw you.
Uh,
You did
but
it, and then in October, and then the last year, watching Drexel, like the last couple of years, really, I think he's like self filmed at least 3 buck kills, if I'm not mistaken. And so that kind of gave
yeah,
me a little bit of a boost. Like, hey, you know what? Like, if these other guys can do this, like, because I just wouldn't go. Like, if I didn't have Dennis to go hunt with me, or you weren't able to come, or Goody wasn't going to jump in the tree with me, or something like that. Like, if I didn't have one of the guys, or Ian even, and I mean, Ian, you know, he's hunting with Lakota a lot more. You know, they hunt together, just like me and Carrie hunt together. So if Carrie couldn't go, Dennis couldn't go, you couldn't go, or Goody couldn't go hunt, I just didn't go. Like, I wasn't gonna go and not. I was, comes down to discipline. I wasn't sure that I would have the discipline needed to not pull the trigger even if the camera wasn't on. Like, and so I was like, I'm just not gonna go, like, because I don't want to be that guy that shoots a deer off film when I'm the owner of Victory Outdoors, and I expect you guys to get it done on film and then be the owner and not do it. You know, it's like, that can't happen. So I just didn't go. But then I kind of felt inspired by your success, and also by, you know, Drexel's success. Like, okay, well, if those guys could do it, maybe I should just, you know, just get it done. You know, just drag in the extra equipment, take the camera arm. Because when Dennis and I hunt, we don't use a camera arm. We just film each other, hand hold it, that kind of thing. Same thing with Carrie. Like, when Carrie and I film together, we don't use a camera arm. And
kudos to you, because when Courtney shot
yeah,
at that buck, that's probably the worst footage that I've ever laid down, because my knees were
yeah,
like weak the
yeah.
entire
I will
time.
say this: like, when you watch your family, you know, and that kind of stuff, and your loved ones like be successful, that gets me more riled up. Like, when I'm not behind the gun, like some of Natalie's hunts, I've been shaking before she pulled the trigger because I was excited for her. But me personally, when I'm in the zone, like, it doesn't get me like that. But certainly, when you're watching, it is a little bit different. But when it's Dennis, I don't know. I guess Carrie, when I've had her hunts, they've unfolded so quickly that it's kind of like one of those things. Like, just, you know, I'm more worried about directing her and that kind of stuff. I'm talking her through it, so I'm not really thinking about. I'm not sitting there caught in the moment watching it on the viewfinder. I'm trying to make sure that, you know, like, I'm telling her, like, to draw. Like, I can remember that doe that she killed, the one that died in the ditch. Like like I remember telling her, like, the deer spooked. Like, it got downwind of us. It was like 10 yards, like right underneath the stand, and it spooked because it got downwind of us, and it wheeled out. And when it spooked, I was like, I just said draw, and she did. She knew. She drew, and that deer stopped at 15 yards, like went a whole 5 yards, stopped and turned broadside and just looked dead at us. And I'm like, kill it. She made a great shot. But, like, a lot of times, like, I wasn't caught in the moment necessarily, but I've been there before with Natalie, where it wasn't her first deer, her first buck. It happened so fast. But the second buck, I definitely found myself kind of caught in the moment, looking over at Ian. Ian was filming, thinking, yep, this is going to go down. Like, she's going to make the shot. And I was starting to get a little jittery before she shot. But so I could definitely, you know, understand being in that role. But, man, it's been a blast. Can't wait to see what you do this spring, both in the 3D realm as well as the turkey woods, man. Maybe you and I can get together and do some turkey hunting. It's been a couple years since I think you and I have gotten the turkey woods together, so maybe we'll try to get together and put them down with the bows. I need to kill one with a bow. It's been a few years since I've killed one with a bow, so maybe I should make that a point to get that done. But, man, it's
Absolutely, man. I know I made you jealous with all those toms, you know, beating
yeah,
up on my dead
yeah.
dead
I
tom
mean,
or
yeah. I mean,
toms. Guess you'll have to watch the episode
yeah,
and find
yeah.
out.
I mean, spoiler alert. Um, Jake's turkey hunt lasted one day, and he killed 2 toms in Iowa. So, I mean, you can take from it what you like, but as you just heard, there were multiple toms. He was self-filming. Nobody else had a bow. He was out of tags. And, yeah, I would have loved to have been there. That was like one of those things where it was still first season, though, wasn't it?
It was actually second season.
Okay, so see, like
yeah.
So I tagged out. I tagged out the second day of first season. The first day, Zach tagged out, and that episode will be coming up here pretty shortly too. So keep an eye out on Carbon TV Waypoint for that, and is also our YouTube channel as well. So we'll be dropping those episodes here in the next couple of weeks as we kind of creep closer to turkey season here in the Midwest. But man, it's been a blast talking to you. We'll have you on again maybe after turkey season, and we'll recap that. Probably try to get set up where we can get like a handful of us on and kind of do a turkey camp update. So we're going to get together and probably have a big team meeting, a big turkey hunt in southern Iowa, and we'll try to get the whole crew on here and see if we can't do a big old podcast and get the team together and kind of update everybody. Probably try to do that 4th season of Iowa, so we'll all hunt the first part of Iowa and then see where that goes. See who's got a tag left in 4th season. But man, it's been good talking to you, and good luck with the 3D this year, and then it'll be great. But hey, thanks guys for listening out there. This is Victory Outdoors, the podcast, and as always, check us out at Victory Outdoors at Facebook as well as Instagram. Thanks guys.